We all know that we need to exercise regularly to maintain our physical health, but it's also vital that we exercise our minds too. Studies show that brain exercises can keep our minds sharp and even improve memory and focus, especially as we age. From memory games to learning a new language, we'll talk about the tried and tested ways to boost your cognitive skills. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Just like the different parts of our body, our brain needs to be cared for as well. Our guests are here today to give us tips to boost our brain health. With us is Dr. Vida Michelle Anlacan. She's an adult neurologist and memory disorder specialist from the Medical City and president of Alzheimer's Disease Association of the Philippines. Also with us is Dr. Celi Magpantay. She's a clinical psychologist from the St. Luke's Medical Center. How do we remember how to ride a bicycle? How do we feel all sorts of emotions like joy, sadness, and anger? And how do we breathe without even thinking about it? So our brain is responsible for all of that and more. Now I'll start the discussion with Dr. Michelle. So when it comes to our brain, what role does it play and how important is it for our body?
The brain controls everything. It's the CPU of our body. So without any input from the brain, all the other organs will not function. But there are many parts of the brain. There is the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. And the brainstem is the one responsible for vital functions, the very basic functions like breathing, heart rhythm, swallowing, and the like.
Now, Dr. Celi, when it comes naman to our brain as that of our emotions, as a source for our emotions, is our brain pretty much the reason for what personality a person has?
There are a lot of study that shows that there's a specific part of the brain that is responsible for our personality and emotional regulation, particularly the hypothalamus or the limbic system. So it's really a complex process where a person can differentiate, distinguish behaviors and emotions at the same time.
Now let's talk about when the brain is damaged, because when we experience maybe a fall or something traumatic like a car accident or even whiplash injuries, it can cause damage to our brains. Dr. Vida, let's first talk about traumatic injuries and how can this affect our brain?
Traumatic brain injuries are blows or bumps to the head causing injury to the brain. It may be very mild, like for example, when you hit your head in a cabinet door or the car door with only a few seconds of loss of consciousness. But sometimes it can be really severe, like when you get into a vehicular accident and you have a prolonged loss of consciousness or you have coma. So immediately you need to be treated for this, for brain swelling, and then later on you have to be guided as to what rehabilitative measures should be done, like speech therapy and cognitive training. In Southeast Asia, the number one cause is due to road traffic collisions. But other causes, especially in the elderly, are falls. So these should be avoided at all costs.
Now, Dr. Michelle, aside from traumatic injuries, what other forms of injuries can our brain sustain?
You can have strokes, you can have blood clots, you can have direct lacerations to the brain. So a lot can happen. Remember, the brain is a very gelatinous soft structure and it's encased in like a hard plastic. So imagine shaking it. So there's a lot of damage to the brain that happens when we have head injuries.
Now, a person's symptoms will depend on the cause and the location on where their brain was injured or damaged, but it can cause cognitive effects for months or even years after that injury. Dr. Celi, what are some of these problems, especially when it comes to cognition with our brains? First of all, let's talk about what is cognition.
Cognition is a process where we use our facility, the higher order facility. So for example, when a person do problem solving, executive functioning, even as simple as memorizing and memory and execution of our language, these are components of our cognition. So when a person is suffering from mild to severe cognitive problems, you would notice there's a deterioration of this functionality. So it varies also from person to person and what parts of the brain is damaged. Usually, for example, with stroke, the most affected area is language.
Talking about that damage, one of the cognitive effects of brain injury that we want to shed light on is aphasia or language loss. Dr. Michelle, when we talk about aphasia, what part of the brain is usually involved in this, and what are the more common causes for it?
So aphasia usually affects the dominant lobe of your brain. So for most people, that is the left brain. So aphasia is a condition that affects how you understand, how you speak, and how you communicate. The most common cause is brain damage from a stroke. So it affects the part of the brain that is responsible for understanding and speech. But there are other causes like head injury and neurodegenerative disorders that affect the language network, such as primary progressive aphasia, which is a form of dementia. So definitely getting old also increases our risk for these conditions.
You bring up a good point, and there are parts of our brain. You mentioned the left side of our brain is that of that controls our language. Can you talk about some other parts of the brain, the right side, the front, and the back as well?
The dominant lobe, which is the left, the frontal, the parietal, temporal, and occipital, they are mostly responsible for our speech and understanding. So if that left side of the brain is injured, so we have aphasia, and usually they coincide with weakness over the right face, arm, and leg. So we identify that as a stroke. The other side of the brain is also important for daily living. Musicality is there, or other functions. For a small percentage of people, the right side is the dominant brain.
Now, language loss can affect everyone differently. It can be very mild, or it can be so severe that communication with a patient is almost impossible. Speech therapy can significantly improve this condition. And today, there are many helpful tools like computers to allow people living with the condition to communicate effectively. As we get older, we might notice some lapses in our memory and our focus, but a few simple exercises can boost one's cognition. More on this when we return. We're your partner in healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk. Today, we're talking about brain exercises for a sharper and healthier brain for you. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. In order to care for our minds, we must first need to take care of our bodies. Dr. Sally, let's talk about how lifestyle can impact our brain, specifically certain things that people might be doing that can cause harm to our brain.
Lifestyles, of course, includes our diet, okay, also with exercises. Now, just like any parts of our body, the brain is very sensitive to all the foods and lifestyle problems that we're encountering, like alcohol, substance use. So if a person wanted to have a healthy brain and memory, we always have to start with creating a better lifestyle. Plus, of course, enhancing our sleep. There's a lot of studies also that prove that memory is also considered a very good factors if a person is sleeping well. So proper sleep, avoiding stress, eating the right food, and maintaining a healthy diet is a very good way to have a healthy mind and a healthy body as well.
For someone who follows a lifestyle, let's say, of heavy alcohol drinking, heavy substance abuse, recreational drug use for whatnot, and they stop, can there be permanent changes in the brain?
Of course, a lot of clinical study have linked that those abusive substances, alcohol, have a long-term impact on the brain. Like, for example, prolonged use of alcohol, we have a syndrome Lor-Korsakoff, which is related to memory loss over time. There's a lack of the vitamin, the thiamine in the brain. And also with the drugs, when a person uses drugs over time, their brain cells is also damaged. So there's a cognitive effect which resonates with the abuses of the substance in the body of the person.
Now, a brain healthy lifestyle includes, of course, exercising regularly, not smoking, not drinking, getting enough rest, and maintaining a healthy and balanced diet. Now, there are even certain foods that can boost our memory. We'll talk more about that later on the show. As we mentioned, brain exercises can help keep our mind sharp. Now, Dr. Michelle, what exactly, when we talk about brain exercises, what kind of exercises are we talking about here, and what kind of benefits can we see?
So I think you're talking about brain stimulating activities. So it can be any new activity for that matter. They increase your cognitive reserve or your neural network. It enables your brain to have more connections with other brain cells. And a big and extensive network gives you a better fallback or reserve in case one part of your brain gets damaged. No? So you can have activities like reading, conversation, puzzles, even Sudoku. But online resources have expanded enormously due to the pandemic, and there are more and more things to do online. So you just have to be open to try new things and find what is suitable for you.
Now, Dr. Selly, Dr. Michelle mentioned about being open to try new things. This can be actually daunting for a lot of people because there's a certain comfort zone people have knowing what they know. And venturing out, trying to learn something can be daunting. But this can actually improve their overall brain function, cognitive function, overall well-being. What can you say about this?
I want to support what Dr. mentioned. No, it's very important as we age, our brain functioning also deteriorates in time because the nerve cells or the brain cells are getting older. So proper stimulation, the brain activities will enhance our brain to a better cognitive reserve as mentioned. So lifelong learning is a trend right now. Elderly or even those who are adult who wanted to experience a new challenge, they can try. They can find simple ways. It doesn't have to go to school or read a lot of informations or article. No, new things like, for example, as simple as baking, learning new specific skills, computer skills. This can also trigger or enhance our learning. So it can also not be content on the other life skills, which will help also the brain to be stimulated and activated because there's a new information that needs to be embraced and learned.
Dr. Michelle, you mentioned several activities that may enhance someone's brain health, cognition. But a key factor here, which a lot of studies mention, is the effort needed to do this. Dapat daw mahirap, may challenge ito. How can this be properly assessed in terms of it being beneficial, this new thing that we're trying to learn? Pag masyadong madali, will this still be effective?
It has to be at the edges of your comfort zone for you to be able to be stimulated. So, but I don't want to downplay the role of physical activity. So it's not just mental stimulation that you need to do. You need to also be physically active. That's why before we used to say that ballroom dancing is the best because not only are you physically engaged, but also you're trying to think of what is the next move. So that's very, very good. No? But I cannot downplay the factor of physical activity because anything that boosts blood flow around your body will also boost blood flow to your brain. So it also prevents brain diseases and heart diseases like stroke, memory problems. So the increasing blood flow not only delivers more oxygen and more nutrients to your brain, but it also washes away toxins and wastes from our brain cells.
Now, Dr. Michelle, you also mentioned how all of these improve our brain health, trying to push back dementia. And specifically, you talked about Alzheimer's disease. What do we know now about Alzheimer's disease? What can you share with our viewers?
What we know now is that we can try to delay the onset of it. We can try to skirt it. So meaning you have to control your vascular risk factors. Like if you have hypertension, diabetes, obesity, then you have to do something about it. Then physical inactivity is something that you have to improve. Hearing loss in midlife, if you're hard of hearing, you have to get a hearing aid or you have to improve that and get that checked. No? So having a good social network and support group will also help a lot.
Now, we all know living a healthy lifestyle can improve your overall physical well-being, but it can also significantly improve your brain health as well. More tips on how to boost your cognitive skills when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk. Word games and jigsaw puzzles are fun, but they also produce a number of benefits. Research shows that brain exercises can boost cognition in the long term. But while it's good to keep ourselves busy, there can be times when we overwork our minds. So, Dr. Selly, I'd like to talk about that. When we talk about trying to boost our cognition, we have to challenge it both physically and mentally as well. But napapagod ba rin ang utak natin? Is this true when we say that we are burnt out, overworked, and whatnot? What is actually happening to our brains?
Just like our body, when we're overworked, more than the 40 hours required for a day, our brain also decline in function. There's a lot of study across Europe and Australia that talks about overworking hours had a very strong negative effect on cognitive performance. You would notice there's a decline in the performance, productivity, sense of reasoning, even focusing and attention is already impaired. And there's a lot more deteriorations on the memory, like lapses already. So you know that too much work, physical, both mental exhaustion is bad for our health over time.
Now, this is why when we find ourselves burnt out, it's vital to take a moment to relax and give ourselves that much needed rest. Me time, as they say. Now, Dr. Michelle, give us some tips on how to find that balance between challenging our brain to make it improve, but at the same time, not overwork it and cause too much stress hormones to overpopulate our brain.
So definitely you should have protected time for rest and sleep. So you can't keep working 24/7. The brain will not be efficient that way. So you have to prioritize your tasks and you have to have protected time for sleep because the brain cleans itself when we sleep. So there is evidence that lack of good quality sleep will really lead to more accumulation of abnormal proteins that will lead to dementia in later life. So we have to protect our sleep time and rest time.
But Dr. Michelle, when it comes to taking care of our brain, of course, it comes along that we talk about nutrition. What are the tried and tested food as well as vitamin supplements that are known really to be healthy for our brain?
We have to make sure that we're eating a well-balanced diet. If you are not eating a well-balanced diet, then you really need your supplementation with your vitamins and minerals. And sometimes we really advocate this for the elderly or the very young because they may have problems with absorption. But it starts with a healthy and well-balanced diet and physical exercise. So they are the cornerstones for brain health and function.
Now, a lot of foods will talk about antioxidant properties that may help decrease damage to certain cells. Dr. Selly, is there any truth to this? Are antioxidants really a significant player in brain health and trying to prevent damage?
Researchers have linked on anti-inflammatory foods, antioxidant, and fish oil like omega is very good for the brain. Now, we know this as like a brain foods. But on the other hand, I wanted to add, aside from what mentioned earlier by Dr. Michelle, engaging in yoga, meditations, and a mindfulness activity can also boost our brain, to make it more holistic in taking care of the memory and elasticity over a period of time.
Now, with the right nutrients and good proper exercise, you can live a long and healthy life. A healthy body leads to a healthy mind. Thank you, neurologist Dr. Vida Michelle Anlacan and clinical psychologist Dr. Sally Magpantay for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time on MedTalk Health Talk.